A little more than 25 years earlier, on the morning of December 12, 1933, hundreds of excited monks had milled around one of the open, stone-floored courtyards of the enormous winter palace, the Potala, their breath visible in the thin air of 12,000 feet. They were there for their annual audience with the 13th Dalai Lama, the 14th's tough, visionary predecessor. But when the maroon-robed monks entered the meeting room, instead of the holy person of the 13th, his compact body and steely gaze, they saw propped on the golden throne an empty robe. His Holiness, it turned out, was too ill to attend the audience, and his followers would be granted only a chance to commune with his garments, a ceremony the Tibetans call inviting the clothes. One monk began to weep. Rumors about the 13th's bout with a flu-like illness had been sweeping through Lhasa for days. The monk felt instinctively that His Holiness was not going to live long. 5 days later, his fears came true, and the Dalai Lama passed away from natural causes. The announcement was made by dancers on the roof of the Potala, beating out a somber rhythm on traditional dramaru drums, and by the sight of butter lamps being placed outside, which in Tibet is a symbol of death. The population was grief-stricken, openly crying on the streets of Lhasa. Each Dalai Lama creates an impression of what the institution could be, and the 13th, who'd held the throne for 54 years, had set a high bar. He had been a handsome man with a shaved head, an intense, transfixing gaze, and the flourish of a thin mustache. Far from emitting a Buddha-like serenity, his official portraits reveal a Tibetan prince, one well-versed in the politics of fear and retribution. But he had presided over the nation's entry into at least a sort of independence, and he was beloved. An old saying decrees that whenever two Tibetans get together, there will soon be two political parties. Tibetans are notoriously fond of political intrigue, and at the Potala there were competing loyalties, power struggles, and infighting that sometimes turned lethal. But the 13th had expertly negotiated the dark waters of political life. On his ascension to the throne in 1879, the Dalai Lama's jealous regent had attempted to use occult magic to get rid of him, placing a black mantra in a finely crafted pair of shoes that were then given to a powerful Lama, boosting the mantra's killing power. Having escaped the assassination attempt, the 13th had ordered the ambitious regent drowned in an enormous copper vat. It was an example of his frequently ruthless nature, but it was also a fact that one often needed to be very tough to survive in the Potala Palace. The 13th's great mission in his lifetime had been to modernize the country and usher Tibet into the company of independent nations. He believed that the age-old threat from Tibet's ancient adversary, China, would return, more powerful than ever, and that his nation, backward and isolationist in the extreme, would prove to be easy prey for its huge neighbor. But by the time of his death, it was clear that he'd utterly failed in this mission. The leaders of Tibet's great monasteries thought that opening the country to the world would spell the end of their domination and the end of Tibet's role as the keeper of the Dharma. They equated modernity with atheism. Westerners were seen as tendra, enemies of the faith, and enemies of the men and institutions that supported the faith. One monk remembered that, growing up, he was taught that India was the holiest place on earth, but that everywhere else is to be feared. It was even permitted to kill intruders rather than let them contaminate Tibet. The 13th dreaded what lay ahead for his country. As part of his last will and testament, he left to the Tibetan elite and to his eventual successor what some called a divine prophecy. But when one reads it, it turns out to be a hard-nosed political analysis of Tibet's position in Asia and a stern warning about the future. It reveals what a steel-trap political mind the 14th's predecessor possessed, and how clearly he saw disasters approach.